The sky was grey, not because of clouds, but from the smoke that blanketed half the planet. Cities had fallen silent, fields lay abandoned, and forests once green and alive stood as charred, lifeless shadows. The world, tired of itself, seemed to whisper its final breath. It was March 22nd, 2046, the last day of the war. For decades, humanity had fought the longest and most devastating series of conflicts in its history. It was no longer about land, ideology, or religion. It was revenge. Every bomb, every missile, carried centuries of hatred. No country was left untouched, not even the ones once called superpowers. But on that day, in the silence between two air raid sirens, something changed. A young soldier from southern Ukraine, exhausted and covered in mud and blood, removed his helmet. He stepped forward to the front line and raised his hands. On the other side, a Canadian commander did the same. Satellite cameras captured the moment, and like fire sweeping through dry grass, the image spread in the deserts of Africa. Weapons were dropped to the ground, among the ruins of Tokyo. Soldiers shared bread with former enemies. In New Delhi, doctors from opposing nations worked side by side, saving what remained of wounded civilians. The world was tired. War no longer made sense, and peace after so long suddenly felt possible. Far beneath the earth, in an old underground UN bunker in Geneva, the last surviving leaders of the world gathered. Their eyes were hollow. The air was heavy with grief and shame. Presidents, generals, kings, ministers, but none felt in control. For the first time, they were all the same. Human, broken, exhausted. At the center of the cold concrete table lay a single document, written by anonymous hands, typed by volunteers, printed on an old machine rescued from a museum. It was called the Global Peace Treaty. Its words were simple. From this moment on, all forms of conventional war are abolished. The new competition between nations will be about rebuilding, helping, healing, educating, and protecting life. Victory will belong to those who save the most. Defeat to those who harm. This is the new world war, the war for peace. There was silence, deep, tense, sacred. The president of the new European Union was the first to sign. His face was streaked with tears and soot. Then the chancellor of the Americas Alliance signed with her eyes closed, as if sealing a pact with her soul. One by one, every leader signed their name, some with trembling hands, haunted by the cities they had destroyed, others with hopeful eyes, dreaming of a world where their children might never hear sirens. At last, an old general from the now defunct Eastern Federation stood before the paper. He looked upward and whispered, "May this never happen again." And when his pen touched the paper, a gentle tremor ran through the room, as if the entire planet had finally exhaled a breath it had held for generations. Outside, screens in public squares lit up with a single message: "The war is over. Peace begins today." People wept in each other's arms among the ruins. Some lit candles, others sang forgotten songs. On global networks, broken hearts found comfort in messages of forgiveness and rebuilding. But there were no celebrations, not yet. There were still millions of dead to bury. Orphaned children. Nations without power, water, or food. There were wounds that no signature could heal overnight. But something new had taken roots, something powerful, a collective decision to never go back. That night, the leaders stayed together in the bunker. They slept on mats, shared bread, and listened to stories from soldiers of different nations. For the first time, humanity spoke a single language: compassion. And so began the World War for peace. It would use no bullets, no tanks, no missiles. Its soldiers would be teachers, doctors, farmers, engineers, volunteers. Its battles would be fought in hospitals, schools, slums, and refugee camps. Each nation now had a new mission: help more than yesterday, and every act would be counted. Save a life, +1 point. Destroy an old weapon, +5 points. Send food to a former enemy, +10 points. Hide aid, 20 points. Spread hate, 50 points. The new world was ready for its hardest war yet: the war against ego, greed, pride, and forgetfulness. And history would say, generations later, that it all began on the last day of war, when men who had lost everything finally chose to fight for what truly mattered. The sun rose timidly over the first day of the new world. There was still smoke in the air, buildings in ruins, and silent sirens that would never sound again. But amid the devastation, trucks began to move not with troops or ammunition, but with doctors, food, and tools. It was the beginning of the first missions of the world: War for Peace, Mission Hope. The United States in Africa. In a destroyed hospital in Goma, Democratic Republic of the Congo, life still clung on, fragile, hanging by makeshift wires and reused syringes. Decades of war had decimated healthcare across Central Africa. But that morning, helicopters bearing the American flag landed on African soil. They did not bring soldiers, they brought doctors, nurses, and cutting-edge equipment. The mission's chief medical officer, Dr. Evelyn Carter, stepped out with her hand over her heart, overcome with emotion. "We didn't come here to save anyone," she told the press. "We came to make up for what we failed to do for decades." For years, her country had ignored the silent wars on the African continent. Now, the time had changed. Over 500 health professionals began working, performing surgeries, administering vaccines, rebuilding hospital wings. Surgical robots were activated in trauma zones, treating patients who had been waiting for weeks. And for every life saved, a point was added to the UN's global scoreboard, now broadcasting every nation's progress in real time. In Africa, the American flag waved, not as a symbol of power, but as a sign of care. Harvest of peace. China turns tanks into tractors across China's vast interior plains. The roar of engines echoed once more, but this time, it wasn't war, it was farming. China, once home to one of the largest military arsenals in the world, launched an ambitious new operation: plows from tanks. Over 2,000 war vehicles, tanks, carriers, artillery were melted down, re-engineered, and transformed into tractors, harvesters, and farming machines. In a test field in Sichuan province, former tanks rolled through the soil, carving furrows where rice, corn, and wheat would soon grow. Retired General Whaley, now the lead agricultural engineer of the mission, spoke while surrounded by young students. "Real victory is feeding the hungry. Our army now cultivates, not kills." The harvest was packed and sent to countries in the Middle East, devastated by food shortages. The first convoy carried tons of grain, escorted by Chinese youth who had traded uniforms for green lab coats. For the first time, China's fields were growing more than food, they were growing hope. Fuel for peace. Brazil serves hot meals in war zones, in the shattered outskirts of Damascus, and the bombed-out slums of Caracas. A different smell filled the air, not the scent of smoke or fear, but of rice, beans, and fresh bread. It was the smell of Brazil. A fleet of colorful trucks, repurposed as mobile kitchens, roamed through conflict zones, offering warm meals, comfort, and music. The project was called Flavor of Peace, created by Brazilian chefs, nutritionists, and former military cooks. Each truck was a mini industrial kitchen on wheels, capable of preparing up to 2,000 meals per day. In a crumbling refugee line in Haiti, a young Syrian girl took her first bite of arroz com carne moída y cenoura, a humble Brazilian dish of rice with ground beef and carrots. She smiled. It was served by Dona Teresa, a cook from the rural heart of Bahia, who now traveled the world, spreading care and flavor. She chuckled. "We may not speak the same language, but everybody understands a hot meal." Beyond food, the trucks carried messages of peace in multiple languages and played Brazilian songs rewritten with pacifist lyrics. In the middle of the chaos, children danced. Each meal served +1 point. Each child fed a seed for a different future. The new war broadcast in real time. The UN launched a new global platform, Peace Score. Here, the world could track each nation's impact. Live. A global scoreboard showed United States, 5,200 lives saved in hospitals. China, 12,000 tons of food harvested and delivered. Brazil, -40,000 hot meals served in conflict zones. But the goal wasn't to win, it was to inspire. Ordinary people began to volunteer, donate, travel. Civil organizations joined the race with just as much heart. What once was coordinated destruction was now organized compassion. Pain still lingered, of course. The world had not changed overnight. Hunger remained. Mistrust still lingered. Old wounds between nations were deep and slow to heal. But something was happening, and movement creates momentum. In a globally broadcast interview, a journalist asked, the UN Secretary General, "Do you really believe this war will be different?" He smiled, tired but sincere, for the first time. "We don't want to destroy the enemy, we want to help them heal." And so, mission by mission, the world began to remember what it meant to be human, that the World War for peace was only beginning, and its most powerful weapons now were kindness, courage, and compassion. If the world learned anything from the old war, it was this: not all heroes wear uniforms. Sometimes they wear worn-out sandals, simple clothes, and carry invisible scars. After the first humanitarian missions, global media began to change. Cameras that once followed tanks and missiles now followed people who saved lives with a hot meal, a warm blanket, or a single act of forgiveness. And so, a new kind of soldier was born. The soldiers of kindness, fighters without weapons, armies, or borders. Amira, the girl who wanted to fix the world. Amira was only 12 years old when she lost her entire family in an airstrike in Aleppo, Syria. She was pulled from the rubble by volunteers from the Brazilian Red Cross, clutching a dusty teddy bear and staring into nothing. For weeks, she refused to speak. Everything changed the day Donna Teresath cooked from the flavor of peace. Project handed her a notebook and a pen. Amira began to draw. Her pictures showed rebuilt homes, blooming trees growing in minefields, children laughing. One morning, in a refugee camp in Lebanon, she organized the first Children's Peace Brigade, where dozens of kids picked up trash, planted flowers, and posted messages of hope on tents and shacks. She would say, "If the adults broke everything, maybe the children can fix it." Social media exploded. Within days, Amira had millions of followers worldwide, not because she danced or made funny videos, but because she embodied the purest form of hope in the middle of horror. The UN awarded her the honorary title of Junior Commander of Peace. Juan Diego, the boy who carried boxes and dreams across the ocean, in the hills of Medellin, Colombia, a 14-year-old boy named Juan Diego pushed a wooden cart stacked with boxes of medicine and food. He had lost his father to arms trafficking and his mother to poverty, but he never lost his heart. Upon hearing about the new war, Juan created his own mission. He gathered donations from local NGOs and crossed dangerous neighborhoods to deliver medicine and meals to the elderly and sick children. On the side of his cart, he wrote a simple phrase: "I'm not rich, but I can share." A European journalist covering Colombia stumbled upon him, documented his story, and published it with the headline, "An Army of One." The video went viral. Juan was invited to speak at the Global Peace Assembly. He arrived in his same stained t-shirt, stood at the microphone, and said, "I don't want to win the peace war. I just don't want anyone else to die from hunger or neglect." He was met with a standing ovation. General Abbas, the man who surrendered to Tian, a forgotten mountainous region of Central Asia, where not even the most advanced drones could fly. Villages still suffered in silence, isolated and broken. It was there that a surprising figure emerged: General Abbas. For years, Abbas had been feared as the Iron Hound of the desert, known for brutal tactics. But war had shattered him. After witnessing a children's hospital destroyed by orders he himself had signed, he disappeared from public life. Months later, he reappeared, rebuilding homes with his own hands. He carried tiles on his back, dug trenches, and organized reconstruction brigades with villagers who once feared him. Global media found him lifting a wall for a school. When asked why he was doing this, he answered, "There are only two kinds of leaders: those who order destruction and those who help rebuild. I'm tired of being the first." He refused political office, medals, or titles, but his name began appearing in schools and books, a symbol of redemption in the era of peace. The soldiers of kindness, a global force, emerges inspired by Amira, Juan Diego, and General Abbas. Ordinary people began to act. Students organized cleanup brigades, retirees began teaching skills, volunteer doctors flew to regions that had once been forgotten by the world. Social media, once flooded with nonsense, now overflowed with videos of rescue, rebuilding, and reconciliation. Hashtags like #PeaceWarrior, #KindnessArmy, and #SavingIsWinning went viral. The UN created a new recognition system, Medals of Humanity, awarded to people changing the world through small but powerful acts. No nationality required, no degree. No rank, Just courage and compassion. The hardest war of Albert, even with all the good. Not everything was light. Some regions resisted the change. Corrupt governments tried to manipulate Peace Corps data. Missions were sometimes sabotaged by hidden interests. The ghost of the old war still whispered through dark hallways, but the difference now, the whole world was watching and holding everyone accountable. When Amira planted a flower, she didn't know she was disarming someone on the other side of the planet. When Juan carried his boxes, he was, in truth, carrying a new civilization on his back. When Abbas laid another brick, he wasn't just building a house, he was proving that even the hardest hearts can be rebuilt. And so, in the rubble of the old world, the true heroes began to rise, not with grand speeches, but with quiet actions that helped the world breathe again, one act at a time. The World War for Peace didn't need leaders with megaphones, it needed people with soul. And these young people and former warriors were proving that the 21st century might finally be Rememberaders, the century of reconciliation. In the new world of peace, weapons were retired. Armies demobilized, and satellites once used to plan attacks were now tracking natural disasters and humanitarian aid convoys. But behind the scenes, another war was taking place. The war against lies. The new spies in the past. Spies would infiltrate bases, plant bugs, and steal secret plans. Now, they investigated donation spreadsheets, international contracts, suspicious cargo, and most of all, acts of injustice disguised as solidarity. This new network was called the Transparency Order, an elite group coordinated by the newly formed Peace Council, with agents from all over the world, investigative journalists, data analysts, former hackers, even reformed ex-spies. These agents operated anonymously, cross-checking information, infiltrating fake NGOs, and using bird-shaped drones to capture compromising footage. Their mission was clear: to expose anyone trying to turn the peace war into a tool for profit and manipulation. The scandal, Operation Cold Light, it all began with an anonymous tip sent to the global channel Peacewatch. The report pointed to a major country in the Northern Hemisphere, wealthy, influential, and ranked at the top of humanitarian aid donors. According to the documents, this government had announced a massive shelter-building project in conflict zones across Southeast Asia. The international funding, $10 billion, execution time, 6 months, but 8 months later, satellite images revealed nothing but empty lots, no roofs, no walls, no signs of life. The Transparency Order sprang into action. Through data analysis, morally justified, illegal access, and local witness accounts, the agents uncovered the truth. The construction contracts were fake. The money had been funneled into shell companies tied to politicians from that country. Worse, part of the funds had been reinvested in surveillance technology, violating the Global Peace Treaty. A spy disguised as an engineer managed to enter one of the ghost sites and recorded a shocking video. Cardboard shacks labeled international donation, but inside, only trash and broken promises. The Peace Council responds. The report was sent directly to the Peace Council, meeting in a secure facility beneath the Swiss Alps. The council's president, a Rwandan woman named Nyasha Mbik, a former refugee, turned global justice icon, received the documents with a heavy expression. Do they think they can toy with people's hunger? That piece is a stage set, she said, reviewing the files. The scandal was dubbed Operation Cold Light, named after the type of satellite used to detect thermal data from the empty structures. The world watched in shock as, in a live broadcast, the UN unveiled the full report. For the first time since the end of the war, the country was publicly penalized. It lost points in the Peace Corps, had its contracts frozen, and was forced to return the funds. Under international supervision, the accused government denied everything, calling it geopolitical manipulation. But the truth was already out, and in times of peace, truth is more powerful than any bomb. Ethical espionage. The case reignited a global debate. How far is too far when it comes to surveillance in this new kind of war? Brazilian journalist André Vasquez, a member of the Transparency Order, gave an interview that went viral. Yes, we spy, but not for power, for justice. Spies used to blow up bridges. Today, we build paths to the truth. This new espionage followed strict ethical codes: never expose victims, never manipulate evidence, never act out of personal interest. Only follow what they called the law of light. Wherever there is shadow, let a lamp be lit. The invisible enemy after Operation Cold Light. Other investigations emerged. An NGO falsifying vaccine records to increase donations. A company pretending to donate food, distributing expired goods instead. A group of volunteers secretly spying on minorities for political gain. Peace, it seemed, was not free of battles. Corruption, vanity, and a thirst for influence still lingered. Only now, instead of bullets, the ammunition was deceit, and the defense, exposed truth. A new weapon, transparency in response to the scandals. The Peace Council launched a new global platform, PeaceTrace, where anyone on Earth could track in real time the origin of donations, the destination of resources, the real impact of each project. It was as if humanity had placed cameras upon itself, not for control, but for commitment, and the new spies, once seen as shadows, were now hailed as the eyes of peaceful justice. The war continues. By the end of that year, a phrase was painted on schools, hospitals, and refugee camps around the world: to lie is to betray peace. And the new soldiers of kindness knew that, even though the violence had ended, the war against hypocrisy and selfishness would be a long one. But as long as someone stood ready to speak the truth, the global peace war would keep winning, one investigation at a time. It all began with a whisper in the southern part of the planet, in a remote village in the Andes Mountains. A young nurse noticed something strange. Healthy people of all ages began fainting for no apparent reason. Their heartbeats became erratic, and most didn't wake up. Those who did had forgotten parts of themselves. The world, still intoxicated by the triumphs of peace, didn't see the danger at first. But in less than 3 weeks, what seemed like an isolated outbreak became global headline news. Silent heart syndrome now affects 14 countries. Cause unknown. An invisible enemy, the illness attacked the neuro-emotional system directly. The heart weakened without explanation, and patients lost the ability to feel strong emotions: fear, joy, empathy. It was as if the world was shutting down from the inside out. Researchers in India called it anima morta, soul turned off. It wasn't contagious like a regular virus, but its psychological effects spread panic rapidly. The Peace Council declared a red alert when selfishness knocks with the news. Many countries began closing their borders, fearing that foreigners might bring the emotional plague. Medicine stockpiles started to disappear, not due to medical need, but fear. Wealthier nations began hoarding supplies. Millionaires bought state-of-the-art heart respirators just in case. Doctors were threatened for trying to share data with rival nations. Solidarity, the foundation of the peace war, began to falter. That's when the true battle began. Call for strong hearts at the Peace Council headquarters in Geneva. President Nyasha Mbek gave an urgent speech, broadcast to billions. If we can no longer trust our heartbeat, then maybe we can trust our actions. This illness strikes the heart, but the cure may lie within our soul. She called upon the strong hearts, a name given to the volunteers willing to cross borders and help, expecting nothing in return. Thousands responded. In Brazil, volunteer cooks sent nourishing soups made from natural ingredients to strengthen the heart. In the United States, scientists began developing the living pulse, a bioemotional chip that could detect early signs of the syndrome. In Ethiopia, young artists created murals and music that rekindled emotional memories in the sick, and in many cases, reignited fading heartbeats. The pain of a choice. But the most iconic case happened in Canada, where a Syrian child named Sapira, already known for leading humanitarian campaigns, was diagnosed with the syndrome. Samira's treatment required the only functioning global neurostimulator, a rare device that had just been sent to a neighboring country, where an infected diplomat, essential to peace negotiations in the Middle East, awaited treatment. The world watched the dilemma unfold. Using the device on Samira might save her life and inspire millions, but using it on the diplomat might prevent ancient wars from reigniting. With a weak voice, Samira recorded a video before her condition worsened. If you must choose between me and the peace of thousands, choose peace. Love is worth more than one life, it's worth them all. The world wept. The device was used on the diplomat, who recovered. Samira died 3 days later, but her final message became a symbol of true peace. sacrifice for others. The empathy vaccine, inspired by Samira's gesture, a laboratory in New Zealand developed a revolutionary treatment, combining biotechnology with personalized emotional stimulation. They called it SER, Sense, Expect, React, a protocol that didn't cure the syndrome, but reignited the will to live. The true cure, they discovered, was collective empathy. Affected areas were filled with stories, hugs, voices, and music. The soldiers of kindness stopped carrying boxes and began carrying memories, letters, songs, and old photos. The heart of humanity began to beat again. A new chapter of peace. Months later, the Peace Council updated the global treaty. In addition to banning weapons and encouraging humanitarian aid, a new article was added. All nations must maintain permanent programs for emotional health, collective empathy, and reconstructive art. The World Peace War had won yet another battle, the most intimate of them all, and Samira's name was not etched into monuments, but into schools, clinics, and even a new medical protocol, the Samira beat, when the heart starts beating again after a deep emotional trigger. What comes next? But the challenges continued. On the horizon, difficult questions emerged. How should nations be judged for failing to protect their people? Who decides what a true act of help is? And how can compassion be kept alive when future generations forget the pain? These would be the questions for the next chapter in the war. No one sees, but everyone lives. "25 years had passed since the end of humanity's last armed war. Weapons were scrapped. Former missile factories had become libraries and art studios. Armies were transformed into humanitarian corps, training youth to save, not destroy. And a new generation, born under the stars of a peaceful world, began to grow. They were called the children of peace. They had never heard the sound of sirens, or experienced the loss caused by hatred. But they also didn't fully understand the cost of building such a serene world. The youth who never knew pan in global schools. Children learned about the wars of weapons and the World Peace War. They studied hunger, injustice, the horrors of greed, and the heroes who changed the course of history. But as they grew, many began asking uncomfortable questions. Why do countries still exist? Who decides who should help whom? If we live in peace, why does inequality still exist? And, most importantly, did the adults just create a new form of control? Questioning the system, a youth movement called Free Horizon began to grow among teenagers worldwide. They didn't want to bring back war, but they did want more freedom to decide how and when to help. They rejected bureaucracy, official seals, and distant councils. They believed that true peace only happens when every person is free to do good with creativity. Inspired by the old social networks of the 21st century, they created Living Voices, a platform where anyone could launch a humanitarian action, with resources coming directly from global citizen voting. The project unsettled leaders of the Peace Council. Some feared it would dismantle global coordination and lead to disorganized efforts, opening the door to opportunists. But others, wiser, realized what was being born: a new stage of peace, decentralized peace, a new mission. At 72, the former general turned peacekeeper Ibrahim Lemos gave his final speech before retiring. Peace cannot be a tower watching over the world. It must become a forest, where each tree supports the other. It's time for us to step down and let the children of peace grow new roots. And so, the old protocols were rewritten. The Peace Council ceased being an authoritarian body and became a global mentor, guiding youth without controlling them. The Festival of the New World 5 years later came the first Empty Hands Festival, held simultaneously in over 60 countries. The name came from a simple idea: we bring no weapons, we bring no money, we bring our hands to help, to care, to plant, to build, to embrace. Thousands of young people traveled with empty backpacks and full hearts. They restored villages, replanted forests, taught children in forgotten zones, brought culture to urban slums. No one was forced, no one received orders. It became the largest voluntary act in human history. When peace becomes culture today, the World Peace War is not taught as a war, but as a transformation. It wasn't the absence of bombs that built this world, it was the presence of active love. Children are born knowing that helping someone is as natural as breathing. The stories of Samira, General Ibrahim, President Nyasha, the Syrian girl, and the Colombian boy live on in books, music, holograms, and above all, in the collective memory of humanity. And the old motto of the peacekeeping forces is still written on city walls and echoed in travelers' hearts. Here, we win with kindness. Here, the soldier is the healer. And here, the only enemy is forgetting. World Peace War was never just a story about nations, treaties, and operations. It was about how, for the first time, humanity dared to win through compassion. And maybe one day, on some distant planet, when people speak of human civilization, they'll say, they almost destroyed themselves. But then, they chose to love.